Good morning, everyone. This is Fader. This is the video on the neutral days and a playbook on the neutral days. In this video, I'll be discussing what neutral days are, some examples of how they form, some trade examples. I think I have two examples. Both of these will be based on the daily profile. I will also be discussing my risk on any trades that I take on the neutral day. Before we start the video, I just want to get the disclaimer out the way. I am not a licensed financial advisor, and this video is specifically for entertainment and educational purposes only. And any platforms that I use I think most screenshots are of TradingView. I've done this for a simple reason, and that is that most traders can access this and they will not have to pay a high upfront cost. I would also like if you guys could excuse any coughing or any other things that are not supposed to happen. This is largely because I am suffering from some sort of throat condition, but I do not know what it is yet. So with that out the way, let's start on the neutral days and the playbook I have for these neutral days. So what is a neutral day? Here on the right, we can see what is a typical neutral day profile. The day tends to be overall balanced with initiative sellers outside of value. I'm talking up here, and you usually have initiative buyers at the bottom and outside of value. There are relatively well-defined tails. These are a type of symmetrical volume profile, and they can also have very extreme examples as well. These are similar to a normal day, which is a almost perfectly balanced day. The IB on these days, or the initial balance, the first hour of trading during regular trading hours, can be small or large, but on most neutral days we often extend to both sides of the initial balance. Keep in mind, these are again daily profiles and not session profiles. I just want to highlight how this profile is an example of an extreme neutral day. What I mean by an extreme neutral day is the range of the day is around 50 points. And this is an example of an extreme neutral day, as we do end up still being neutral, as the profile is still quite symmetrical, despite the fact that we had a near 55 point range on the day. So we've now discussed what is a neutral day, how they look like, or the profile type, and what type of profiles they are similar to. I am now going to discuss how I play these type of profiles. So if we're being quite frank and honest, I really try to avoid trading the aftermath of these days, or I rather resort to using weekly or monthly levels on days which follow a neutral day. So say we're on Wednesday. This is the profile that presents on Tuesday. I would probably look to use my weekly or monthly levels on the day rather than using any levels derived from this neutral profile. There is only one real setup that I have on this type of profile. The other setup that you'll see in the later example, not the first one, the second example, is slightly different and more unorthodox, and is something that will probably remind you more of the double distribution rather than a neutral day. This setup itself is also quite unorthodox, as I personally rarely trade this or post about it, and even when I do, it often doesn't work out the best. So for this setup, I find the lowest distribution on the profile. So in this case, it would be down here, and my level to trade is usually placed at the top of this distribution. I usually want to get long on a reclaim or rebid of this level rather than the first touch of this level, or short once we get below and hold. Since I've been asked many times by chart traders, if you do not have access to a depth of market or the DOM, you can use a 15-minute or 30-minute chart to look at candles, but again, I highly recommend a DOM. But the DOM is slightly more discretionary in terms of trading, so I am not going to cover it, as this is a volume profile course. But on the right, we can see an example of an extreme neutral day. The lower distribution is marked down here, and the top of that lower distribution is chosen as my pivot for the following day. As I said, I would want to get long on a reclaim or rebid of this level. What does that mean? I want to see us dip below, say we go into 4060s, go back up, trade back into 4066, and then go higher. I don't want to get long on the first try. I really want to get long once we get below and reclaim that level and rebid it. Now I am going to tell you about the risk and when I know I am wrong on the trade. As I've said multiple times, my risk on most S&P 500 trades ranges from 3 to 5 points, and this depends on the volatility on that given day, as well as if the trade occurs during regular trading hours or extended trading hours. As I have stated previously quite a few times, I really don't like trading the aftermath of these days and much rather prefer using any weekly or monthly profile levels that I have for an upcoming day. I will discuss how I get weekly and monthly profile levels in a separate video. The video will be out shortly after the class begins. With that being said, I would try a rebid long of the pivot a maximum of once, and if we get below, I would only attempt to short once, and the maximum number of trades I would take on such a day is 2, and thus my max loss on that day would only be 2R, so I cannot lose more than 2 brackets on the day. Now this neutral day preview that we just saw is a pretty common profile type. They present quite commonly on the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq markets, so not having a trade on them is not ideal. So when I discuss these profile types, you can probably see that it slightly resembles some other profiles we may have talked about. You can use the playbooks that I have talked about on, say, the double distribution or the P and B shape profiles and apply this to the neutral day and try and trade the neutral day based on those profile types. So I now want to go into an example. This is the S&P 500 on the 1st of December. In the following slide, you will see an example of the trade setup based on the first slide of how I play these profiles. We had a trend day on the last day of November. This day was a neutral day with a range of about 60 points. We had initiation at both extremes and ended the day relatively neutral. In this example, the key level identified would have provided quite a few points. And please do keep in mind that I have stated that I do not like trading these types of profiles. So when I say the trade is going to be based on this setup, the setup where we have a main distribution and we want to pick the smallest or the lower distribution on the profile, and the level to trade is placed at the top of the distribution. So let's go see the example. This is the profile type. We can see this is the low volume or the lowest high volume node on the day, or the lowest distribution on the day. Our level would go above this. We can see we get quite a nice bid once we trade off that level, and then we get a nice offer on that level, and we also get a nice bid again. As I have stated, these profiles are not something I would really like to prefer or like to trade, so I'm only giving you this example so you don't really burn yourself trading these days. These tend to not be my best days to trade. There is another setup that I will discuss in the following slide, or in the following slides, that covers this profile type in slightly more detail. But we can see we also do have this distribution up here, and we do have this main distribution up here. The second setup will focus on shorting the main distribution. That is also a relatively good trade. I also want to point out that this profile is the same as this profile is just not rendered as nicely, so you can tell that we were getting this level. So here is the same thing, that is the same as this. So we can see that the level would serve, as I said, we would use this as a pivot. So our first trade would be too long. I probably wouldn't have taken this if we're being honest. We can see we had quite a few reactions at the level yesterday, but that isn't the reason why I wouldn't have taken this. As I said previously, I like us to get below, get above, and then rebid the level to get long rather than just getting long off the bat. The offer, on the other hand, I would have taken because we get below, we get quite a nice red candle below, holding below, and then we retest the level and then reject. The bid I would have taken here. Why? Because it has done what I wanted it to do, which is I would want us to dip below, offer. The offer worked out quite nicely. Get above, hold above, and bid. So that's what happened. That would have worked out quite nicely. And then the level fails again. So I have said I really don't like playing these days, but I still have a setup to keep in mind for these days. The maximum risk on these days for me is 2R, so I can't risk more than 2 stop losses. Why? It's just a personal rule I have, because these days generally don't tend to work out well for me at all. So now that we've discussed this example, I want to wrap up this example. So the example on the previous slide, we can see that there was quite a few reactions at the derived level from the profile. We initially bid up into London Open, so up here, before diving below, and when the level was offered again from below, so we went below and offered the level. There were quite a few points on offer. Furthermore, once we reclaimed above the level, there was a further few points to be caught on the bid. As I have stated before, my preferred setup for this profile is not to have a setup at all and to largely avoid trading this. But if I was forced to make a trade, given that I have this profile the day before, I would trade the setup that I have just outlined. So now that we've discussed the more orthodox or the more simple approach to trading these profiles, I want to discuss a slightly more complex approach, which is combining the approaches we learnt in the double distribution profile video to the neutral day profile. So this is going to be another example. This example is in crude oil on the 15th of December. In the next slide, you will see an example of a trade setup that is slightly more unorthodox and combines approaches from other videos that I have already made. We had a decently balanced session on this day in crude oil. The day had a range of about 230 ticks, and we were able to derive 2 levels on this day. This approach was indeed very similar to the approach that we had taken in the double distribution profile, largely because there was quite a big secondary distribution, even though in my opinion it was still a neutral day. We did end up having a smaller distribution form. In the example, the key levels that were identified would have provided quite a few points and served you quite well. I just want to point out, if you haven't seen the double distribution profile video already, you probably want to, because this had some similar characteristics to that video, and you will see that in the next slide. So let's go over the next slide of the example. So here we can see the volume profile of the example. We can see that it is a neutral day profile. However, within that neutral day, we do have these distributions 1, 2, and 3. In this case, I will be focusing on this distribution as well as this distribution. Now, you may ask yourself, why have I chosen this as a level and this as a level? In this case, we are following the double distribution playbook. And in that playbook, we did state that we want to long the top of the lower distribution. In this case, this is the lower distribution and the top has been marked. We can see how that would have served us over here at 76.08. Now, if we focus on the more important level, This is the level at 76.56, which is marked with this dash line. You can probably also see why I got this level. On the double distribution video, we talk about wanting to short the bottom of the upper distribution, and in this case this area is the bottom of the upper distribution, and that is why I have chosen this as the level. We can also see in the later part of the day we have 1, 2, 3 reactions, 4 reactions, 5 reactions, 6, 7 reactions on this level. So we can see obviously that it is quite important, and that furthered by the presentation of a high volume node in that area is enough for me to short this. We can also see how the short plays out. It would have been quite nice. However, another thing to note here is the how this 76.08 level switches and serves as a pivot. Once we break below, this is the session where it's from. We open the session, trade into the level bounce, trade into the short level. Once we get below and hold below this level, we continue further. So we can see how there are multiple, this is another trade setup for the neutral day profile. This setup is slightly better than the previous one. However, an issue is that this binds together double distributions and neutral day profiles, even though this is not a double distribution profile type. Regardless of this, we should consider the double distribution profile or playbook in this scenario. Why? Well, because they look relatively similar, except the fact that we don't have a large low volume node separating them. As I have said previously, I don't really like trading neutral or normal days, so I wouldn't really want to take more than 2 trades on this day. So the first trade would have been too long here, and the second trade quite obviously would have been too short. After that, there would be no more trades on the day. Why? Well, because neutral days tend to not be my best type of day. So now that I've talked about this example, I just want to wrap up this example in the next slide. So the example on the previous slide, we can see that there were quite a few reactions at the derived levels from the profile. The short entry was virtually perfect. Just a point, although the profile does resemble a double distribution profile type, in my opinion, it is still a neutral day profile, and so it should be treated as such when it comes to trading. The long, on the other hand, at the lower distribution would have also worked out quite perfectly, and then this level serves as a very good pivot later on in the day for any late shorts that wanted to enter on that day. Just a point, let's just go back to that, the profile. There could have been a level up here, say at 77.20, so across here. Why I didn't choose this level was because we obviously didn't trade into there, so I couldn't really show it as an example, but it would have also worked quite nicely if you drew another line here, and it would have served you just as well, or arguably better, as 76.08 or 76.56, because we had quite a bit fewer trading around this area compared to down here, because we can see we had quite a few wicks and trading around this high volume node as well as this high volume node, but we unfortunately didn't trade into that level, so that couldn't really be used as an example in this scenario. So now that we've talked about the examples, I've given you examples, I've shown you 2 quite different and distinct examples, and they were quite different from one another. I want to wrap up this video, so let's wrap up this video. Neutral profiles are quite common. They are one of the most common profile types or variations, and in my experience they are much harder to trade as compared to the other profiles that I have covered in the previous videos. The only one real setup that I like is the one that I covered that revolves around the lower distribution, and even that requires quite a lot of trader discretion in regards to actively monitoring the tape and price action to make sure you are not caught offside. Just a point on this, the second setup that I showed wasn't really to do with neutral days. We just adapted our setup that we had for double distribution profile types and applied it to a neutral day. So I want you guys to consider everything you've learnt in the other profile type videos and apply those to these neutral days, as they have quite a lot of variance, just like trend days, but they can provide you with a few good opportunities if you know where to place your trades. So you need to combine the previous profile types that you have learnt and apply them to neutral days, as they themselves don't have much of a great setup. So I want to thank you guys for listening, and the neutral profile video is done, and a fader out. Thank you.